Hi there. Welcome to Phase of Future. This is my YouTube channel. This is my own business for reading astrology and intuitive counseling. I am not just a Western astrologer, I'm also a tarot card reader and a numerologist. A little bit of everything when it comes to the metaphysics. But Western astrology, I use the Placidus house system. That is the most common system of charting you're probably going to come across, whether you're using social media apps for astrology or more popular websites. Generally, what shows up when you first pull up a chart is going to be the Placidus house system. Everybody has their own system, but really, find one that you feel connected to and align with those resources and the people that also use those systems, because that's where you're really going to find a lot more resonance. So that's my little thing I'm going to throw out there for you. We are going to be talking today about the November 8th total lunar eclipse in Taurus, our North Node sign currently. This is a very exciting event, you guys. I feel like this is the event. If we can, pin one event in this eclipse cycle down, my money would be on this one. We are seeing, really, really major influences from Uranus, who has been the long-standing lone planet in Taurus and basically in this entire eclipse Scorpio axis too. Sorry, this Taurus Scorpio axis. Because there really hasn't been a lot in Scorpio either. We have some personal planets in there now, of course, because of Scorpio season, and we usually see Mercury or Venus hanging around the sun or not too far away from it, so those aren't uncommon, which those are all three in Scorpio right now. But Uranus has been in Taurus, has been stable and growing our vision, growing our futures, taking some real hits from Saturn with that square that's been prolonged. And I'm excited to say that this is the last event that involves that square. I sent out a really bold communication about my own life and my own experience with the Saturn-Uranus square that started back in the end of 2020 with the Great Conjunction. Maybe you heard of that event. That kind of kick-started COVID, and those planets lining up at the time were Jupiter and Saturn in 0 degrees Aquarius. Pluto was also conjunct those two, and that's a rare assortment, right? Pluto was still in Cap, of course, and then Saturn was in Uranus was in Taurus, and so it created that square. Of course, Jupiter started the square, and it's really interesting to see in a lot of my research, Jupiter shows up at the beginning of a major event, which that's its nature. It's about awakening really major life changes, and events on a global scale. Yeah, Jupiter leads us into the collective energy. Um, Lots of theories on that, but it's cool to see how in those past 2 years, where have you really seen a lot of delays? Usually pertaining to work and your future in general. Of course, the future of the world, of the Earth itself, has been, very unstable in some regards, and we've needed this placement of Uranus and Taurus to remind us just how solid things actually are up ahead. Despite us, pivoting, most of us, shifting careers, losing family members, losing loved ones, all of these surprises, on a major scale. This particular relationship is extremely fascinating, and it has been very difficult. These are not easy breezy personal planets that move quick. These are long-standing energies. These are very complex energies. Uranus is using like the full capacity of the mind, or at least what we can use as an earthly human, which still, doesn't even brush the surface. But and then Saturn is trying to continue to plan and have statistics and have results and hold people accountable and seek to deliver in areas of our life where we didn't have precedence. We're just experimenting and creating where Uranus is, and so Saturn is just like took on way too much work in this relationship. Um, and we can all feel that. We can all feel that kind of restrictive quality that's been holding us back from really feeling free to move forward. And of course, that because of these global kind of energies, these collective planets of Saturn and Uranus, we can see that on a much bigger scale, not just in our personal lives, but some events in astrology are bigger than just us, but of course they echo. So that theory of as above, so below really does hold true, and is perhaps one of the foundational principles of astrology, you know? So that's exciting, but of course, the main thing that we're going to be talking about is this eclipse. What does it hold for you? I'm going to be talking about practical tips as well as pinpointing what planets are most majorly involved, and any other shifts that we've been through recently, because there's always some things happening around these eclipse activations that gives us a little more clues, a little more energy and experiences to take on. So get comfy, get out some notes if you want. You can use this just for yourself or to share with others. Hey, wherever this goes, I know it helps somebody. So that's what I'm doing here today for you. So get ready, and here we go. Okay, so this is the chart. I'm not sure which side of me you're seeing it, but this is the chart for LA. So if you are a West Coast person, this is going to be more applicable to you. If you are not a West Coast person or an LA person, disregard the houses and the placements in this chart. What we are really focusing on are the planets that are involved. So what aspects are making to this moon at 16 degrees. And we already have some things visually. We can see some things here. But yeah, just note that wherever you are, you're going to have a different chart pertaining to your location. And of course, a different time depending on the time change. So keep that in mind. This is not the chart for everywhere in the world, not at all. But what we're really going to be focusing on, and if you've been following these videos, are the relationships between the planets. That's where we're getting the most clue that is applicable for everybody watching this. Okay? I just run it as LA because that's where I live. So if you are an LA native, hey, maybe you get a little more from this visually. So let's just start off by talking about what a lunar eclipse is. Eclipses, I keep seeing on social media, I think people that are a little newer to using this in their content, a full moon and a lunar eclipse are the same thing when there's the north node involved, okay? So full moons happen every month, Usually we get about 12 every year, and we get about 12 new moons every year. We get one each month. And that can shift, maybe we can have an extra one or we can have one less, depending on how that calendar carries through, kind of like the leap year thing. Sometimes we have a day more each year. Sometimes we have an extra moon event, or we don't. So eclipses, what determines an eclipse in the sky is the proximity to the nodes. So unfortunately, I still haven't figured out how to use the pointer on here or where it can show up for you guys. So look to the right of the moon on this chart, 13 degrees. We see this little circle with two circles at the bottom and a dot in the center in Taurus. That 13 degrees is called the north node. If you've ever had a chart reading, the north node is an eclipse point. So it's specific to when you were born in your chart, of course. You can see where the eclipses were occurring, what signs they were in. If you were someone that was born with the North Node in Taurus, this is a major, major cycle for you. Or even if you have the South Node in Taurus, the opposite of the North Node, which would be an upside down, like U shape. My software that I use astrotheme.com, does not show the south node on here, but the south node is directly opposite the north node, so to the exact same degree and minute in the opposing sign. So it's at 13 degrees Scorpio at the time of this event on November 8th, okay? And the nodes move pretty slowly. They take a year and a half to move through a zodiac sign and really an axis, because they're working together just on opposite ends of the zodiac. So we have a 1.5 year period where we're really learning what the current Taurian energy is for the collective. And the Scorpio energy is, on a much more personal level, with the South Node, and with this in mind, this is determined. So if the moon comes into proximity, they usually say it's about 10 degrees within range of the north node or the south node, then it's considered an eclipse. Now, there's a scientific explanation to that too, but just for your own astrological theory and understanding, you need this north node object in really close proximity to the moon, whether it's a new moon or a full moon, to make it an eclipse. And that goes for the south node as well. If it's the south node that's really close to the moon, then it'll be an eclipse as well. But it's about 10 degrees. They have to be conjunct. Okay, and so this is a really exciting event because this extremely close proximity, here we see less than 3 degrees of separation. We are getting a total eclipse because of that close relationship between the moon and the north node in this event. So this is more rare. I don't know how common it is for every eclipse cycle to churn out total eclipses, but I would imagine there's at least one in every eclipse cycle. And so the total eclipse brings with it this sense of like full realization, like a full circle effect or like a totality. And so it feels stronger, the energy that you can access, the things that are coming up for you, are really like coming to a head, coming to a close. Every lunar eclipse, which is basically a full moon with an eclipse, so let's understand that for a second. A full moon is when the sun is opposite the moon. They're exactly opposite each other, like we see here in this chart. But here, since we have the node in close proximity, this full moon is an eclipse, okay? And so they're not separate events. They're the same thing, and so I would say, this is an eclipse, and it's not necessarily a full moon because this is on an exaggerated scale. So I don't know if that helps anyone that's confused, but an eclipse and a full moon can be the same thing. But an eclipse is like the overarching term or name for a full moon event that includes a close proximity to the north or south node, or a new moon event that includes a close proximity to the north or south node. Okay? Hope that helps anyone that's confused. But the eclipse means, let's think about it visually. Okay, so the moon, this is a lunar eclipse, so the moon is getting eclipsed. The solar eclipse is the sun gets eclipsed. The lunar eclipse is the moon gets eclipsed, okay? So that means we're not going to see the moon for a minute. That means that the lineup between the sun, the earth, and the moon is going to be blocking out the moon for a minute. And so it looks as if the moon disappears. It's eclipsed, right? And so maybe not as scary as a solar eclipse where like we can't see the sun. But it still carries that phenomenon. It's like the moon is getting a reset. It's going away for a second, and then where it's reactivating. There's light that's going to be coming back to it, within a few moments. So usually the actual portion of the eclipse is just but a few minutes, sometimes not even. But the total proximity, whereas some of these other ones have been partial, carries stronger energy for us all too. And that's the meta lens of astrology is, we see meaning in every part of an event. Nothing is without meaning. It all kind of ties in, and it all gives us a deeper understanding of how it's going to influence us at that time. So that totality is really important because it means this is a stronger event than a partial would be. And totality, you think about the total, it's the sum of all the parts. You're kind of bringing everything together, right? And that's the moon's job in general, is this community, is this unity. And we really see that as a big theme for this event because the moon is conjunct Uranus, our planet that represents networks, communities, groups online, all kinds of niche groups or interests. And so it really speaks to the people, the humanity of the globe, and us kind of being unified for this cosmic event. And so with that, let's go into what's actually going on in this event, shall we? Okay, so the biggest aspect of this eclipse, which there are many with this one, is the Uranus conjunction to the moon. Okay, Uranus is making other aspects, but the conjunction to Uranus here is the strongest activation that the eclipse will be bringing. So imagine it's almost like you have a ball and you're going to pass it to a certain person or a teammate, imagine like the moon having the ball of energy, and who is it giving it to? It's giving it to Uranus, who's right beside it. And so they're working really close together. Maybe they're on the same team in some regards, but that's what it is. So Uranus is getting the eclipse energy the strongest. And this is a planet that doesn't often get involved in this way. But since it's been in the sign of Taurus, while the eclipses are happening in Taurus and Scorpio, Uranus has had a huge influence on this eclipse cycle for us. Since, again, it's been the long-standing planet, the lone planet in either of these signs until just recently where, things moved into Scorpio, and then back in May where we had a few of the personal planets moving through Taurus, of course, during Taurus season, but nothing has remained in either of these signs really except for Uranus. And so Uranus has been carrying us forward as its job is to awaken a future, right? It's our future self. It's the future of humanity, of the globe, and we like to usually take space from Uranus. This is an energy of invention, of experimentation, and so we don't do that really well when there's someone like looking over our shoulder or someone pressuring us to do something right the first time if we've never even done it before, right? If it's never even been done before in existence, right? So Uranus is that. It's us doing something we've never done before. And since it has a huge role in this eclipse cycle, that's playing out in all of our lives in some way. And since it has a strong relationship to Saturn, that's playing out in most of our work lives in some way. I can't think of any jobs that really haven't been influenced by COVID, by either going online or, changing their approach, creating a virtual store, having new protocols, regulations, some of the Saturnian stuff. So we've all been affected, and for most of us, it's really hit us where we give most of our time and attention to the most, which is usually our work life, and the people and the relationships involved in that. And so Uranus brings surprises because it's experimentation. And so we've all kind of been branching out and seeing what we could do in new ways, maybe in new fields of interest, or just working with people we've never thought we would work with, and identifying different parts of ourselves that before this cycle started we didn't know were inside of us. And so it's interesting to realize how different your life was before COVID. And this transit is a huge part of all of that, okay? Um, so Uranus here is showing us, what has this all been about? What have we been guided into? How have we opened our conscious mind more readily throughout this period? And even the start of this eclipse cycle, like the end of last year. And so, it has a lot to do with what kind of technology you're using at this time, what you've been trying to build, literally and metaphorically, and what you've produced. Taurus is a sign of, creation. It's one of the fixed signs. And so, that personal energy means that it can manifest something tangible because it has its own sense of vision, its own sense of reality, that it can extract something from. It can and create something from. In Taurus, it has everything to do with the natural resources of the world. It's kind of like the earth itself as a physical vessel, as a body, and having a greater relationship to the world and the natural state of existence, outside of society and outside of mega cities and all of that. And so part of it is tapping back into our more primal nature. Taurus isn't as lively as a fire sign would be, but it still has a bit of youth to it, being the second of 12 signs. And of course, being fixed, it feels very personal, what we're all trying to accomplish and build. And so what we're trying to excavate for the future, does have something to do with us in our personal lives. It speaks to us in some impactful way. But Uranus here shows friendships, technology, the future, and then of course we see just humanitarian issues, kind of emerge for this event. And since this is a full moon eclipse, the full moons are always about bringing things to completion. And so that totality in this event really carries through and seconds that notion as well. We're really seeing us and how far we've come in this cycle and seeing what we've amounted. And so this isn't like the Scorpio eclipse that we just had where we were activating something new. This is more about receiving and allowing for those things that you've been working towards, relationships, literal work, whatever it is that you've been implementing or taking on in your life, kind of we can see it. It's kind of a lot more realized, if not fully realized, by the time of this event. And the North Node has everything to do with your work life. In every eclipse cycle, the North Node works as your goals, your work that you're here to do, literal and non-literal. You know what I mean? So we all have different goals, not just pertain to work, but it can be things you want to do around the home or in relationships or wherever you really feel like there's some serious good for you to achieve. And so that's every eclipse cycle, where the South Node is about where we can rest, where we can find home, where we can bring about ease or flow. And the South Node really, the job of the South Node in every eclipse cycle is to allow for healing, is to allow for, more of the moon energy, whereas the North Node is like the sun. That's how I see it in my practice. And so, North Node is kind of what you're trying to achieve that can be seen readily by others around you or the masses. And so, again, it has a lot to do with our work. That's usually where we put most of our time and attention towards achieving things. And has a lot to do with the people that we're working with. So North Node here shows like, hey, we've created some really tangible things. We have a lot more clarity than we did when this eclipse cycle started. And Uranus is that. Whenever it's majorly involved, things start connecting. The dots start to connect. Our intuition feels stronger than ever. Uranus really is that. It's kind of like the mastermind energy. And so it really sees how everything has its own part and how it all serves a greater purpose. And so it's a really nice energy in that regard. Of course, a lot of people struggle with surprises. Personally, I love surprises. Of course, a death isn't a surprise that anyone loves, but generally speaking, a lot of us do like surprises. And Uranus has that factor to it, and so that is something that we can. It's hard to expect surprises. It's hard to say that because even that kind of viewpoint can kind of push maybe some away. If you kind of have that really ingrained in you, like, oh, there's going to be a surprise. Oh, there's going to be a surprise. You know, um, but keep that in mind. That's its nature, is surprising, doing things differently. And so, what will we notice around this eclipse are the people in your life that usually go their own route, that are very not easily influenced, that have a strong mind, have a strong perspective, and that also activates that side of you wherever it is in your astrology. So look to your natal Uranus placement to understand what does it activate in your life. Maybe you are Uranus in Capricorn, so it activates, work success. Uranus in Libra, a new partnership, or furthering down, a big relationship. So that's a part of this too. But it feels like this is the event where we're seeing where and why we've been guided to the things we've been guided to in the last 2 years. And even more recently, the last year since this eclipse cycle began. But with that Uranus-Saturn relationship, I really feel like this one goes back farther. So the best way to test that is to see who's coming up and when did you start those relationships, to kind of get a context of what does this really have to do with for you? Again, that's the intuitive, is oh, okay, well, what's manifesting for me around this time? But Uranus here is, we're really seeing how evolved our friendships can be now, how evolved our collective, our communities can be. Uranus brings crowds together. It's not about the individual. It's about the group. It's about the collective. And that's been such a huge focus on every social media app, and just that term, the collective, keeps growing and growing and growing. And so this is a large scale human efforts or care. And so, that's what we're seeing, is really about what do our groups, what have they brought forth? What have they produced? Literally or metaphorically. Again, it's helpful to think in both of those ways. So that's a part of it. And again, bringing more clarity to your internal guidance, where you've been guided intuitively to go and to work and to all of that, and realizing, oh, okay, I really feel like there's going to be a lot of aha moments for people if you haven't already been experiencing them. And just that kind of sense of connection where everything is just starting to make more sense, and we can really see through that really conscious connective lens where we really do feel like our part is significant, even though we're only one of, 7 billion people, because we're kind of one through our separation. And so Uranus brings that context. But what have you done that you have never done before in the last 2 years? What delays have you experienced? And what could you not foresee because you have never done it before? That has everything to do with this. So big things, and so these are good surprises. Of course, Taurus is our money sign. And so, maybe in that regard, there's a bonus waiting for you. There's some kind of government stipend or something coming. There's an electronic signature of financial income manifesting for this event, which can be really nice. If that's something that you've been waiting for a while, get ready to receive. That's again, the lunar influence is usually about kind of just allowing everything to come together. The masculine solar energy is about going and doing and like chasing the rewards or the prizes. The lunar is all about just like being a part of what is already established and really enjoying and feeling whole. And so that's one of the really nice things about full moons in general, let alone a lunar eclipse, is really about who's in your life and taking some time to really honor the relationships that have been manifesting for you, and certainly the ones that have had a lot to do with your work life, which our friendships have had a lot to do with our work life, with this Uranus Saturn square that's been ongoing, and that's been its own practice of boundaries and experimentation. I can speak for myself in that, and again, that's all largely in part to social media becoming so big during this time as well. But that's it. It's about interconnectedness, and feeling like we're all trying to reach the same goal. We just all have our own personal take as to what that is, but we're trying to create more unity, more consciousness, more awareness, more togetherness. I think that's something we can all agree on. If you can't agree on that, I don't know if this work is for you, because that's where it's going to continually lead you to, time and time again. So what else do we have going on? A lot to say there with Uranus. So, let's see. Let me pull up these biggest aspects here so I don't miss anything. Of course, we have an opposition to Mercury. So it's nice when we get the personal planets involved here, because it does feel like there's some control that we have, or like we really feel like we can kind of be a part of it. And, Mercury means where we are kind of like really feeling these changes, these fluctuating states of fear and transformation in Scorpio. Joining with this full moon event can be very stabilizing since it's in Taurus. So that'll feel really nice. I don't know about you guys, but with that Scorpio eclipse, like it's really easy to be alone for those solar eclipses. They feel so lonely, that solar, it's about the self. And I guess that depends on a lot of your other astrology, of course, but I'm the kind of person that I do have a lot of self time, and that time recently I was just like, I need people time, I need to balance out that. And so that's been really nice to see, and that's kind of what we're seeing with the opposition to Mercury, is coming together with people that for this event can be very helpful, especially if you struggle with mental health. I think everybody does in some way, to be honest, so you're not alone in that. And so that's happening. So opposite Mercury, it really has a lot to do with the connections and the conversations. And so this is a very mind ruled event with Uranus and Mercury heavily involved. So you're going to see a lot of studious intellectual types, whether those are people that you literally know or distant people, figures, again, on the web and the networks, making speeches, all kinds of stuff. Oh, and this is election day too, so that has a big influence too when it comes to choosing, which is always Mercury's job, is picking a side, going in a direction. So that's big, and I'm pretty sure Uranus has a big influence in the USA's chart. I think it's on the descendant, if I'm not mistaken. The chart that I look at for USA, Uranus is there. So big social justice planet, which is helpful. Now, we also have a trine to Ceres. So Ceres is in Virgo at 16 degrees. So this is a very strong aspect for, an asteroid to be making. So we have to take that into consideration. Eclipses kind of give us a bigger orb or a bigger viewpoint to some of the lesser known astrology pieces if they are heavily involved, which Ceres or Demeter is. In Virgo really has a lot to do with our health, dieting, and how we are kind of managing our day-to-day lives through work or through our personal life. Where do you feel like you are kind of in this kind of cyclical process? Are you getting results out of these routines and these habits? Ceres really speaks to that, is speaking about planting something and then harvesting it when it's just ripe. And so this influence here with this full moon effect really feels like we're picking things at the right time. We've waited for them to grow. The trine is a very pleasant aspect. It means we're working with the same elements. And so this is nice. It feels like we've been saving, we've been waiting patiently with Virgo energy, and we've produced some really nice results. And so I think that's a good relationship that's happening here. But ultimately, just breaking it down simply, Ceres can indicate that this does have to do a lot with your work that you're doing, not just big picture stuff, but like the literal tasking, kind of seeing what that's produced financially, and how ritual has really helped you in achieving your goals and staying strong, because this eclipse cycle is really testing our mental fortitude, and just kind of how strong we can stand with our vision despite all of the chaos and the extremes that Scorpio is kind of producing on the other side of it. Remember, Taurus is like the steadfast, like rock energy. For me, it always draws up an image of a solid rock. Like you can't get through it. You have to go around it. Like you can't move it. It's too big. It's too strong. It's too solid. And so we're all learning how to kind of have that, especially through a mental lens with Uranus being the mind, to be a lot stronger with our mental clarity and how we intuit things and how we interpret things and how we interact with humanity and the globe is just feeling a lot more capable mentally. And I think that has played out in a lot of ways, But Ceres here, has that as well, of like that focus on the ritual and, kind of what it's produced for you. So that's exciting. So that's coming up. Excuse me. We've talked about Saturn a great deal. This is a T-square to Saturn because the sun and the moon are opposite each other, and Saturn is in the middle of those two objects. And so, Saturn tends to create difficulty, is a kind of punishing energy, but it gives us delays or setbacks or situations where we're pushed to kind of compromise or do something that isn't necessarily outwardly desirable, or it's kind of like it's that person that shows up to the party and they're kind of like not a wet blanket but a stick in the mud. They don't bring the vibe down necessarily, but they could. And just having that kind of person in close proximity, we all kind of get like this, and so it's really important to kind of not project negativity onto Saturn if we can help it, because it can surprise us. It is in the sign of Aquarius, and who knows, maybe it's come a long way in its own presentation in this cycle. But T-squared to Saturn, this event has a lot to do with your work life. So you're going to see major things unfold with work, stuff you've been waiting to happen. Remember, this has everything to do with Uranus. So this future that you've been cooking up, there's going to be a lot of things that start to make sense when it comes to your work life, and where you've stayed really committed. You've signed your name to something, a lot more clarity and a lot more people, if they haven't been on your side or you haven't been very understood in the work that you've been doing, a lot more unity in that, which can be really nice if you have been struggling with that. So that's happening. we have an opposition to Venus. So Venus, of course, is opposite the moon, not as strong as Mercury. But Venus here, is really important because one, it rules Taurus, and so there's already this seconding notion of Taurian energy here, even though it's in Scorpio. Venus does really well in an opposition. I see this as her desirable aspect because Venus is our relationship planet. She likes to stand, and look at someone, and observe, judge, love, be with someone. And so Venus on her own, if she was alone in the chart, I get a little worried when Venus is alone. But when she's opposite or when she's conjunct, like which she often is because she's usually close to the sun, this is a good Venus. So this has to do a lot with finances, of course. Taurus being that money sign, where it feels like you yourself don't have a really good handle on maybe how to stay afloat or what you're doing with finances. It's in Scorpio, and so it really shows us trying to kind of stay afloat or not making good decisions or just being more prone to temptation or the kind of darker impulses, that we can, put spending into. But here, this eclipse is really allowing us to receive in different ways. Uranus is unexpected. And so that means different work opportunities come together at the last second or things you didn't expect happening. And I'm going to say that this is a good connotation. I mean, good is subjective, right? Uranus, just isn't a malefic planet. So we like to see it. It's a planet that strives for unity. And so that usually means that it is for the betterment of all, which I don't think there's anything wrong with that, right? Hey, maybe we don't feel like as honored as an individual during full moons or lunar eclipses or Uranian eclipses. But the point is for us to feel as one, to not feel that separation. And so keep that in mind too, okay? That's really what the solar eclipses are for. So Venus here opposite the moon, Uranus, the North Node, shows that this is really about our relationships unfolding, especially any new ones coming through since it's so close to the sun, or where you've really been struggling on a daily basis with money. We're getting a lot of help here on the other side. So these are, I'll use one of my own examples. I had a fender bender, a rear end unexpectedly. Of course, car accidents usually are. 2 weeks ago, and I got a check from my insurance company, and I'm not going to tell you guys what I'm using it for, but needless to say, it was a nice surprise, and no one was harmed during the accident, and it was just very, very minimal damage. And so the universe works in mysterious ways. So just be open to that. So that's a part of this too. So we have the personal planets around Scorpio, and so our personal life is going through some extremes, and I think I spoke to that already in the video, where it really feels like the energy is shifting from one day to the next. Which can be fun when you're like, oh, it's roller coaster time. And then when you're like, oh, okay, I'm sick now. There's that happening, in our relationships. We can see fear mirrored through the people in our lives and navigating that. But amazing things come out of Scorpio energy because we either prove that things aren't real and they're just fear-based thoughts and projections, or we do expose them and we do find out. And so we're in that testing ground of what are we going to see, and so, but it's really nice opposition to Venus that shows that this is a love transit as well, in the sign of trust and stability and promise and even marriage. all those things that Taurus rules, is really nice. So it feels like the people around you are kind of holding trust, and of course you are to them as well through this event. And so it's very stabilizing, the effect that we're having on each other. Whereas individually, we really feel like we're up the creek without a paddle. Everyone around us really wants to support us in different ways, in whatever ways they can, whether in person or distantly. And so keep that in mind. People really do want you to succeed. And the more you believe that, the more you will see that, okay? The other thing that's happening is a sextile to Neptune. This is a wider orb. I'm not sure that every astrologer would use this, but this is greater than 6 degrees. But I'm using a wider orb because this is an eclipse. And so the energy is magnified. It permeates a little farther than a regular full moon would. Neptune means that this, sextile aspect is like, what are we talking about? It's a conversation piece. And so it's not something that is a fully realized relationship in an event, but it is something we get close to, we learn more about. And so Neptune can be, secrets, things that have been hidden. Again, Uranus also has that in alignment. It's like trusting your intuition, above all else, above what you see sometimes. And Neptune, says look past what you see visibly, and really listen to what you feel. Okay, and so that can really help you in any conversations currently. What are you picking up intuitively? What are you feeling around people, and how is that really guiding you at this time? Because that sometimes says a lot more than people are trying to say logically. The logic really gets into people's ways a lot, and we just, it's not that we shouldn't believe people, but we just give words so much weight sometimes, and Neptune just reminds us, like, that's not the only way we communicate, and that's not the only way you can ascertain truth. Oftentimes it's the worst way. So Neptune has a little bit of that, some sensitivity. So who are you talking to that you usually find is quite sensitive, usually kind of likes to hide back. Maybe they're a very isolated type, but they have very strong beliefs, and that's why they have that kind of separation or distance from other people. So who does that draw up in your mind? And again, you're going to see your intuition really enhanced for this event because of that as well. A bit of spirituality, of course, when we see Neptune. So any kind of social things, any people that you're talking to, that can be a big topic. But uncovering things, Scorpio season, still a theme. So there are many themes that tie into these events, right? But there are some major planets. We've got Uranus, we've got Saturn, we've got Neptune, and then we've got Mercury and Venus. So that's like half of the sky involved in this event in major ways. So keep that in mind. This eclipse is activating a lot of us. So we see like this is an event that really brings our intelligence to the forefront. Use your wit, use your smarts, and how are you using your mind and your inventive self to really get you to where you need to go to be successful in whatever endeavors you're starting out with, or you've been trying to find success in. That's a big part of this. So those are some of the major things. We just saw, let's see what just happened there. Oh, there you are. Okay. We just saw Mars start its retrograde phase in Gemini. And so Gemini has a lot to do with, our communication, how we're moving around about the world in smaller ways. This is not our vacation planet. This is our daily life. How are we navigating? How are we driving around our city, our neighborhood, to work and back, to the coffee shop and back, or how are we walking, but there's a connection between the mind and movement when we focus on Mercury and how those two things coexist. So Mars retrograde means we're slowing down in some regard. It's maybe more important for us to circle back on conversations that we've tried to have, or where we have held back from saying what we needed to say. So kind of a bit of a Mercury retrograde feel, because Mars doesn't really carry much energy, much definition. It's just kind of raw energy to utilize with wherever it shows up. It doesn't really have a purpose. I remember, Mars happens before Leo, or Aries happens before Leo, which is where we identify the self, where we know who we are and what we're here to do. Aries or Mars is really about just taking action, just doing it for purpose sake, because we need to do it. And so it doesn't feel as fulfilling when we work with Mars, but it is necessary. It is like those steps, like when you wake up in the morning and you have to get your day started. You have to do those things. Mars is like the have-to planet. Hey, if you can work in some fun into the things that you're starting, or bring some excitement to whatever you begin, then great. That probably shows in your astrology. But Mars is just like, this is it. So it's very blunt, and it's very like commanding in that regard. I always think about military, or like the soldier, kind of taking some orders. So in Gemini, Mars retrograde means we really need to slow down and be a little more informative, or there's time to reconnect. Especially in this event, we can see that highlighted. But bringing people together, and so Mars is showing us, since it went retrograde recently, it's kind of still in the collective field for this event, even though it's not heavily aspected, that we're kind of going back to the start. What beginnings did you start this year, or this cycle, this eclipse cycle? And how are you being reminded of those beginnings? Are you getting the chance to talk to those people again, or maybe you were going too fast and you didn't do things that you needed, and so it's kind of about that, but a huge focus on communication. And it's not just like slowing down, but it's like having more important things to say. When a planet's in retrograde, that means the matters that it's concerned with are more vital. And so when a planet is moving forward, we can experiment more. We're trying things new. It's moving forward, and so it's discovery. And so there's not as much of an agenda. When a planet's in retrograde, we have it's almost like a deadline. We have to do things by a certain time. Things are more important. Things are more expected. We have to be a little more conservative of the time that we use and make it more purposeful. We have to make sure the relationships that we've already established with that planet are getting their attention and energy, and so just keep that in mind. Mars are usually the masculine identifying people in your life. Especially ones that are a little more straightforward, very speedy in Gemini, just fast thinkers, talkers. So we're all kind of like slowing down the ways in which we move, and maybe if you have any travel coming up, or you're already thinking about planning for the holidays or whatever, this really signifies returning back to beginnings. And so we think about family, birth, origin, all that kind of stuff. So it really feels like if this has been a cycle that you feel like you've gotten very far away from your roots, this retrograde throughout this holiday period, Mars retrograde lasts throughout the new year, is about kind of reestablishing where we've come from, how we started, like literally from birth, because this retrograde doesn't happen very often. And so when it does, it's important. And when it does, we have more license to not just try things for the sake of trying things, but for anything that we do, it will feel more purposeful because we're more intentional. We have more of a goal. And so keep that in mind. This isn't, when it comes to experimenting on the day-to-day basis, maybe that's more Mars' job. And this Retrograde, is just showing that that's not what we're really doing now. That's not what we're really concerned with. So keep that in mind. And how are you trying to regulate your daily or your morning time? That's a really big Mars influence, and the way that you start your morning could be a really good parallel to how you see yourself start other things. And are you more successful in the mornings now? I've been taking a little more time to make sure I clean the kitchen before I leave for work and stuff, whereas before I really didn't care and I would just come home to dirty dishes and stuff. And so that's one of the ways that I'm experiencing this retrograde. My Mars is in Virgo natally, and so I do see a shift in cleaning and preparing. But there's also some work opportunities that I'm circling. But think about that for you. Always go back to your natal placements to see how you'll experience those things. But I just want to throw that in there too. This feels like a very purposeful event. This feels like things that we've been waiting to come to a head. Remember, the lunar is about things receiving. And so it's about showing up and being with people. And so it'll really benefit you to be a part of whatever events or plans that are surfacing around this eclipse time. A week on either side of it, to be more exact. So it's not just at the time of the event. But yeah, those are really big things happening. So this is exciting. Again, I think this is the event of this cycle, especially because it so closely involves Uranus, which has had so much of an emphasis in this cycle. Really big things. I get very excited about Uranus because it's one of the astrology planets. It's about, science or research. Maybe less of the fun qualities of astrology, which maybe be Jupiter or Chiron's job. But Uranus is really about really seeing what these things have transpired in our lives and obtaining some really good information that can help us move forward with more understanding. And to spread that knowledge. That's a big part of what we're doing now. It's not that things can't be monetized, but ultimately we're trying to heal the world. And even through something like an astrology reading, you'd be surprised how much healing comes through when we focus on somebody, when someone allows for themselves to be focused on. We don't get those opportunities that much, especially in a way that is designed to really open the ground for real clarity, and so Uranus are the people that maybe you don't get as much time with, that you are getting a lot more time with this cycle, and that has been very fulfilling because that means that you needed more. You needed more of that distant energy, that connection of like, okay, I can't be so up close and personal with all these newfound sensitivities and this new awareness of myself and my body and everything. And so these pockets of time with these people that I don't usually get this time with has just been so fulfilling. And I'm certainly speaking to my own life in this cycle. I've been very lucky in that regard. So those are the qualities. And simply put, if you have any practical or ritual curiosities as to how to use the elements for this event, it's an earth sign, fixed earth. And so, these are about possessions, jewelry, objects, things you've inherited, and just using the earth, plants, trees, rocks. Again, I always think of rocks when I think of Taurus, in whatever rituals or ceremonies, if that's your thing. But remember, this is a stabilizing influence. Taurus is the sign of just standing your ground. And in fact, you can get really comfortable. You may not even have to stand. You can sit. It's kind of like the mountain. And so just know that at this time, you're going to be harnessing energy that is immovable. And so people may rattle you, but it's just to remind you of how strong you are and how strong you have set up your life to be at this time. You've put all these things into place, and they're all starting to formulate. They're all starting to come together to show you that you are exactly where you need to be, and you have every opportunity within arm's grasp. Okay, so you found yourself in a really good spot. And I'm being reminded that of myself right now, and just how that kind of distance between our work and even our passion has been to kind of excavate this clarity. It wasn't about us just jumping into all these new works and new fields. Of course, most of us did that because we always get excited about the new, but Uranus really wants us to be able to take space from the things that we're trying to organically produce, the things that we're trying to make successful. Uranus is showing us how if we give ourselves some space to experiment and for those things to grow on their own, they will more successfully. And so with work, with the North Node in Taurus being so close to Uranus this year, we've seen that if you give yourself more distance from the things that you're trying to do that you've never done before, you will actually allow for more answers and more clarity to find you and to guide you forward, like intuition. And so, because Uranus is not an up close and personal energy, those are the personal planets or the fiery planets, and so it's kind of all about that, and with that relationship to Saturn, hey, we've all tried. We've all tried in all kinds of ways to kind of master it before the time was right, or to get ahead, and we just ended up getting behind again. And so we're really mastering a Uranian cycle as well as this eclipse cycle. So keep that in mind. But I hope you enjoyed this video, and remember, your intuition is your best guide in any metaphysical practice, astrology being one of them. Open yourself up to the signs around you, the energies, the people that are harnessing these planetary energies, and you get to experience it as you interact with them. So yeah. Happy eclipse, everybody. I would have really encouraged you to see this one. It's happening in Los Angeles at 3:01 a.m. I know it's not a very easy time to go out and see an event. I have a telescope that I have not unwrapped, and I've had it for going on a year now. Well, I'm getting close, but it's definitely a part of my cycle, and I'm so excited. I have to figure out where I'm going to go to use it, but I'm definitely going to be looking through my telescope at this event. So wherever you are, and if you can, definitely make a point to do so. Major stuff. So thank you for subscribing. Please reach out to me if you want to learn more about this. If you want to be taught how to read charts, I do offer that. So please DM me on my Instagram, Phase of Future, or I don't know if there's a way to message through YouTube, but if there is, feel free to. And I also, of course, offer chart readings. I'll link my Calendly website below. Yeah, I hope you guys have had a great cycle thus far. I know we've had some extremes, we've had some loss, but Taurus is here to remind us of how strong our future really is, and how, the world isn't going anywhere, okay? And it's time for us to get more creative, get more conscious, and become more connected to all that is. All right? Bye.